Members. So, members, we are now to commence the meeting of the Planning Committee. Please can the webcaster start the broadcast of this meeting to the public via the Council's YouTube channel, Braintree District Council Committees. This channel has been set up to make sure that anyone can observe our democratic meetings. Please therefore remember this meeting can be watched at any time by anyone with access to the internet. There are subtitles available on the Council's YouTube channel. These are generated by YouTube. The Council is not responsible for the subtitles nor their accuracy. There is a delay between the meeting and the broadcast on the YouTube channel of approximately 30 seconds. Webcasting officer, please can you commence the broadcast and confirm?
I can confirm we're live.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee on Tuesday the 2nd of March 2021. Before we commence with the proceedings this evening, I can confirm that the Council has adopted some basic etiquette rules for its remote meetings, and these are as follows. Please only speak when the Chairman invites you to do so. Members, please let the Chairman know that you wish to speak through the chat function. The Chairman will introduce speakers in the order at which the request to speak has been made, unless there is a point of order at which we will give way. Please minimise all distractions while you are in the meeting. Members are asked to mute your microphones when you're not speaking and to consider turning off your video if you have interference on your connection to this meeting. Please bear in mind that there may be a lag between the speakers and other attendees hearing you. Presentations for this evening will be shared on the screen by the officer. Please indicate on the chat function if there's any problems. When referring to a report, it would be helpful if you can quote the relevant page and paragraph numbers for the office and your colleagues to follow you. There is no private business for tonight's meeting. However, if it is necessary to move into private session, please can I remind members it is your responsibility to make sure your connection and your meeting venue is private. If you lose connection at all during this meeting, please rejoin the meeting and I will readmit you. If it is necessary for you to contact me, please contact me on extension 2610. Please use the chat function for the purpose prescribed for requesting to speak or for point of order. The chat function is subject to the access to information regimes of FOI, EIR. It is also subject to data protection, rules of defamation and the Council's Code of Conduct. To assist with managing the chat function, the agenda items will be placed in the chat function to act as markers. I can confirm that the meeting is core of the requirement of the members to attend. The Planning Committee consists of the following members. The Chairman is Councillor Wendy Scattergood, the Vice Chairman is Councillor Ina Parker. The remainder of the committee comprises of Councillor James Abbott, Kevin Bowers, Tom Cunningham, Patrick Horner, Hilton Johnson, David Mann, Andy Mundy, Frankie Ritchie, Gabrielle Spray, Nick Unsworth, Justin Wrench. This evening we have apologies from Councillor Unsworth. There are officers in attendance and these include Chris Padgey, Planning Development Manager, Melanie Crobishley, Senior Planner, Lisa Page, Senior Planner. Alison Webb is the Governance Officer who will be clerking this meeting and reading any public question time statements. My name's Emma Wisby, I'm the meeting facilitator. To help the public distinguish councillor from officers, councillors have a prefix of CLLR, officers have a prefix of officer, and registered public speakers have a prefix of PQT. I will now hand over to the Chairman, Councillor Wendy Scattergood. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you. And good evening, everyone, all members of the public watching on YouTube, members of the committee, and to those that are here this evening to make a statement. I will go straight on with the meeting. And the first item is apologies for absence. We have apologies for Councillor Unsworth and everyone else is present. Item 2. Declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda having regard to the Code of Conduct for members? Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just for transparency, item 5A of the agenda this evening, 19-02304. Members of Councillor Caulfield's family are known to me. I have not discussed any aspect with them or indeed Councillor Caulfield, so I shall remain debate and vote. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I will declare an NPI on item 5E at 20-02001 full, land opposite Jaspers, Shalford. I've had email conversations, if I can put it that way, and one telephone call with ward councillors, but only around practicalities of the differences between this application and a previous one, and how the parish council or residents could best. Oh, sorry, did you hear any of that?
Councillor Spray, could you just repeat your whole declaration just for
I'm
transparency,
sorry.
please?
I
Thank
think
you.
my finger twitched on the mute button. I'm so sorry. I'll declare an NPI on 5E, land opposite Jaspers. I've had email conversations and one brief phone conversation with ward members just around the practicalities of the differences between this application and the previous one, and how the parish council can best make their views known this evening. So I will remain and vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Yes, I'd like to make an NPI, please, in item 5F, which is the item at Ashen. I've had a number of email correspondence with the two representatives speaking this evening, mainly to do with another aspect of this site, which is not the subject of this application. I've also had a brief conversation with them regarding this application, but it was more a question of procedure, and I did not offer my opinion on the application at all. So I will remain and vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Parker. I have no one else indicating they wish to make a declaration, so I'll move on to item 3, the minutes. Members, we have the minutes of the 2nd of February, but the minutes of the 16th of February are not ready. So we're going to be looking at the 2nd of February, and I will be taking silence once I have a mover and seconder on this item. Is it your wish that I sign them as a true record?
Move that is so, Chairman. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Councillor Mann.
For the 2nd of February.
Seconder?
Councillor Ritchie, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. It has been moved and seconded that we agree that these are a true record and they are the minutes of the 2nd of February. I will take silence as your approval. Thank you, members. Item 4, public question time. We have no general questions on any item this evening, so we will then move on to item 5. Members, we do have one item in part B, but we do have 2 speakers on that application, so we cannot unblock that this evening. So we'll move straight on to the part A applications. And the first application in part A is application 1902304 out. PLC Hunwick Limited, Kings Road, Halstead. This item can be found on pages 6 to 39. And I do have speakers. Now, the first statement is going to be read by Alison, and it is a statement by Mr. Lee Sapsford. And I will go to Alison. Can you read this for us now, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. This is the statement by Mr. Lee Sapsford. Please do not go ahead with this building in its current form because 1, there is already not enough parking in the area and no new additional parking being allowed for the shops, retail outlets would be a terrible idea and for the friends of the new home owners. 2, too many houses in the space of that size. 3, from the Halstead planning meeting, you would need to consider new pavements on the side of the developments and road widening. 4, there is already poor police service in the area and this would make it worse. 5, our overstretched surgery would be even more under pressure. 6, this either would need completely scaling down or a car park for at least 20 cars. 7, possible compensation for people opposite and neighbouring the site being so inconvenienced by this. 8, the chance of flooding facing the area. 9, we have already had 2 new estates built recently with no extra amenities, services or road improvements. I don't believe more can be necessary. That's the end of the statement. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Mr. Sapsford, for submitting your statement. We now come to the next statement, which is going to be read by Mr. Rupesh Harding, and he is an objector. Mr. Harding, please. I just remind you have 3 minutes, and you are muted. Mr. Harding, you are muted.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I welcome the prospect of development of this site. I believe the effect of granting planning permission for this development and plots 1 to 7, which has already been granted, will be to seriously impact on street parking in Kings Road from its junction with Parsonage Street in the east to the westward end of the park. The growth of car ownership has resulted in evening and nighttime parking along the full length of the road as far as its junction with Mitchell's Avenue. This reflects the nature of the existing housing along Kings Road, with few having the ability to park off-road. Considerable inconvenience will be caused to the residents of 1 to 21 and 32 to 34 in particular, with ongoing competition for available parking in the rest of Kings Road and Balls Chase. I welcome the change of heart by Highways to permit 2 accesses from Factory Lane West. However, comparing this new layout with the original application for the entire Hunwick site submitted in June 2018, it provides for an additional access from Kings Road, making 4 in all in a stretch of Kings Road amounting to about 130 metres. I submit that each of these accesses will remove on-street parking places for existing Kings Road residents. Drivers, especially fire tenders, refuse or delivery vehicles, entering or leaving the site of this application will need the entire width of the road to make the manoeuvre safely, as demonstrated in the site plan drawing. This will likely require the extension of the current parking restrictions to the detriment of the existing residents. The provision of 1 parking space only for each of the flats will be insufficient, since many of the flats will have dual occupancy at least, and some of them will have more than 1 vehicle associated with them. Under Section 63 of Essex County Council's car parking guidelines for dwelling houses, flats should have 1 parking space per dwelling, and additionally 0.25 of a parking space for visitors. 12 flats equals 12 spaces, plus a quarter of that again for visitors, means that it should be a minimum of 3 spaces for visitors rather than the 2 provided for. Several objectors have proposed giving access to this site from Parsonage Street instead of Kings Road. I support this proposal. I object to this application on the grounds of detriment to the existing residents of Kings Road, with particular reference to on-street car parking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for your statement. Thank you. The next statement is from House to Town Council, and it's going to be read by Councillor Peter Caulfield. Councillor Caulfield, your statement, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members, House to Town Council has no objections to this brownfield site being developed. It's been a blot on the landscape ever since Hunwick's engineering was demolished. But due to its unusually close proximity to residential dwellings, any plans there must prioritise the neighbouring housing and the needs of the residents, and this application does neither. For decades, the engineering works was accessed almost daily from the corner of Factory Lane and Parsonage Street by heavy haulage HGVs with minimal inconvenience to anybody. But this new development will see new entrances in Kings Road, which will have very serious and I'm sure distressing consequences for the residents. It seems this application has been designed with no consideration for the surrounding environment at all. There is little in curtilage parking in Kings Road. Most of the people have to park on the street, and the street is full. If this goes ahead in its current form, where are they going to be able to park? Already, Balls Chase and from the mini roundabout towards Ravens Avenue is clogged with parking. Tidings Hill is too narrow, and Parsonage Street has no suitable areas. Residents will struggle to get their weekly or monthly shopping home, especially those who are elderly or less mobile, and deliveries to their homes will be impeded. And with no close proximity parking, it's highly likely that houses there will be harder to sell and property values could drop. Whoever would want to be responsible for that? In respect of the site's layout, the plans show no in-curtilage parking for the residents there either, providing instead rear parking courts. Now, these are so out of favour these days that they're actively discouraged by planners across Essex. Residents hardly use them, they're inconvenient, they often feel unsafe, And as a result, they will park on streets or as close to their homes as they can. And I know Essex Police has already commented to this effect. And then there is the commercial side of the site with its access direct into Factory Lane, which is a ridiculously narrow street, heavily used by traffic travelling from the east to the west side of the town. And in our opinion, the potential for conflict with construction vehicles makes access points there unsafe. All in all, members, this is a flawed design. And if it's to be the success we hope it will be, it needs an overhaul. But the success of this new development must not be at the expense of the health, well-being and quality of life for the neighbouring residents. Planning isn't just about accommodating new building, it's about protecting the existing environment. It's about ensuring the population can sustain a happy and healthy lifestyle. And in its present form, this new development will deny all that to the residents of Kings Road, and that can't be right. I would urge you, please, to reject this application in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor. Thank you for your statement. That brings us to the end of people wishing to make a statement on this application, members. We'll now go to the presentation, which is going to be made by Melanie. Melanie, are you ready?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
Right, by way of an update, members will have received this afternoon updates on all of the planning applications, particularly in reference to where we are with our new local plan and the impact on our 5-year land supply. I don't intend on reading out the entire statement, but there was just a couple of points that I just wanted to make sure members were aware of. That on the 22nd of February 2021, Braintree District Council adopted the Shared Strategic Section 1 of the local plan. On adoption, the policies in the Shared Strategic Section 1 local plan superseded a number of policies from the adopted core strategy. These are CS1, CS4, CS9 and CS11. The committee report for this application was published prior to the adoption of the Shared Strategic Section 1 local plan, and therefore references to policies CS4, CS9 and CS11 of the core strategy. Given these policies now have been superseded, members are advised to disregard these policies when determining the planning application. Then moving on to 5-year land supply. Following the adoption of the Shared Strategic Section 1 local plan on the 22nd of February, there's been a material change in the Council's 5-year land supply position. The published committee report sets out that the Council's 5-year housing land supply position was 4.59 years. This is now changed to 3.73, and then there's extra text below that within your update. And then finally, officers have had regard to the adoption of the Shared Strategic Section 1 local plan and the change in the 5-year land supply position. When reconsidering the tilted balance, officers' recommendation remains unchanged from the published committee report and still consider that the adverse impacts would not significantly or demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in this framework taken as a whole. So moving on to the presentation. So before you this evening, members, is an outline planning application for 4 2-bedroom houses, 5 4 to 5 bedroom houses, 12 flats and 10 commercial units. As I said, this is an outline application, and the matters we are currently considering on this application is access, layout and scale. The 2 remaining matters, appearance and landscaping, would be considered at a later stage, at the reserved matters stage. So moving on to the next slide, most members will probably be aware of this site within a central position in Housestead. It's surrounded by roads on 3 sides. So we've got Factory Lane West running along the northern edge of the site. This is Parsonage Street running down the right-hand side. To put it in context, the fire station just off of the slide here is here, and then along the bottom of the site is Kings Road. This is an existing site survey which shows the broad location of the existing buildings on the site, that they were removed from the site in 2016, so about 4 or 5 years ago now. Moving on, this is the proposed layout for the development. So starting in the top corner here, this is the commercial element of the proposal. So we've got 2 blocks with the 10 units spread across them across the two, with its own vehicular access off of Factory Lane West, serving the car parking area to the rear. Wrapping around the corner, we have another vehicular access that would serve the flatted block with all the car parking and visitor spaces within that space there. The flatted units, there's 12 within there, 12 one-bedroom units in a block that turns the corner between Factory Lane West and Parsonage Street. Apologies. Moving along Parsonage Street, then there are 5 larger properties along Parsonage Street, 2 pairs and a detached property that would turn the corner. Appearance hasn't yet been determined yet, but the applicant is aware that we would be wanting something that has at least 2 active fronts there, given that it turns the corner between Kings Road and Parsonage Street. Moving along Kings Road, as has already been mentioned, there are 2 accesses proposed here. One that would serve the larger properties fronting onto Parsonage Street, and the other access would serve this terrace of 4, plots 8 through to 11. Just to put it in context with members, this portion of the site here is an earlier application that was allowed on appeal and is referred to within the committee report and is shown on the site location plan for context. Moving on to the next slide, so we've got some street elevations here. The one at the top is the street elevation along Kings Road. So this stretch of development here is the development that was allowed on appeal a few years ago. Then we've got the retained dwellings, 32 and 34 Kings Road. Then we've got the terrace of 4, and then you can just see here, this would be the end property, the corner turner, so to speak, that runs between Kings Road and Parsonage Street. The middle street scene here is what you would see from if you were standing in front of the fire station. So you can see we've got the 2 pairs of houses and the detached property. These grey buildings here are existing properties within Kings Road. And then the larger building here on the end, which turns the corner onto Factory Lane West, is the block of 12 flats. The bottom street scene is the view from Factory Lane West. So starting on the left here, we have the elevations of the block of flats where it turns from Parsonage Street into Factory Lane West. Then this gap here would be the entrance into the car park for the flats. And then there is a landscaped belt between that car parking and the car parking for the commercial units. These are the 2 units that are linked at first floor. You can just make out here, this would be the Undercroft access for the commercial parking that's located to the rear of these buildings. Moving on to the next slide, this is really just to show some of the highways works, and there has been already mention about the access points. I'll just run through those again. There is 2 new accesses proposed on Factory Lane West, one that would serve solely the commercial units and another one that would serve the flatted block on the corner. It should also be noted that at the moment there is no pedestrian footway along the southern side of Factory Lane West, but that is part of the proposal here, that a footway would be introduced along the length of the site, which would then connect up with the existing footway that runs along the Parsonage Street side of the site. You can also see here the 2 access points onto Kings Road as well, one serving plots 8 to 11 and the other one serving plots 12 to 16. The next few slides show some photographs of the site. I will run through these fairly quickly because hopefully most of you are aware of the site. So this first one here is looking across the site towards the northwest. So you can see all the buildings have been removed from the site. These building materials that you can see here are for the construction of the 7 dwellings allowed on appeal recently. Moving on, this is then looking towards the southwest across the site. These 2 properties here are number 32 and number 34 Kings Road. So they remain within the site, and the built form is proposed to wrap around those. You can just probably also make out some scaffolding poles here. They represent the dwellings allowed on appeal. Moving on, this is looking southwards across the site, and you can just make out properties in Kings Road, and then also Balls Chase, and you can just see where they rise up the hill when you travel up towards the length of Balls Chase. The next few slides show photographs of Factory Lane West, looking towards the west, a little bit further along. And then this shows, again, looking westwards. And then the next photograph shows it looking eastwards. So you can just make out in the background there, this is the tower for the fire station on Parsonage Street. Moving on to Parsonage Street, this is so that where I'm standing taking the photograph, the fire station would be behind me, and you can make out there's the pavement that runs around the eastern edge of the site, and you can just make out the properties in Kings Road in the background there. This is looking directly across the site, looking west from Parsonage Street. Oh, skip ahead there. Again, you can just make out the roofs of number 32 and number 34 here. Moving on to the next slide, I'm looking along Parsonage Street, and the fire station would be on my right-hand side here, and this area of greensward, which doesn't form part of the application site, so would remain. And the two pairs of detached houses would be proposed along here, and the detached house roughly here. We see that better on that photograph. So the detached house would sit on this corner, and as I said, we would be looking for a property that has two active frontages because of its prominence within the street scene. So this next slide shows a photograph of Kings Road, or the end of Kings Road, and as has been mentioned by a number of the speakers, there is a number of properties, because of their age and position within the street, do rely on on-street parking. As you can see, this is taken during the afternoon yesterday, and there were already quite a number of cars parked along Kings Road. This is a little bit further along Kings Road, looking to the northwest. And these two red brick buildings here are number 32 and number 4. Sorry, number 32 and number 34. As you can see, there is more on-street car parking. This is the last photograph looking along Kings Road towards the Lidl site, and this scaffolding here represents the 7 dwellings that were allowed on appeal a couple of years ago. This photograph, as you can see, is looking back down towards Parsonage Street. You can just make out the fire station here. This access here will actually be closed up, and a new access would be sited roughly in this location here. And then the other one that serves the pairs and detached property is roughly in this location here. The next photograph would probably show that better in this location here. Again, this is looking towards the mini roundabout along Kings Road. That's the end of the photographs. So just wanted to run through the heads of terms that's within the section 106. So we have affordable housing, which is 6 units for rent. There's a healthcare financial contribution towards the Elizabeth Coulthard surgery. There's public open space, both to do with the maintenance of space within the site, but also 2 financial contributions, one towards the Ramsey Road Recreation Ground and one for equipped play at the King George V playing field. Then we also have the RAMS contribution for the residential portion of the site. By way of an update, a draft has been circulated to the planning agent acting on behalf of the client for this application, and that draft is currently being reviewed by them. So summary and conclusion, the site lies within the town boundary of Housestead, where the principle of development is considered acceptable. This is the redevelopment of existing brownfield site in a sustainable location. The development would provide 21 and 6 affordable dwellings towards the housing supply and 10 new commercial units. Officers consider that the proposals accord with the draft allocation LPP 26. Matters regarding access, layout and scale are considered within this application, and officers are satisfied that the site can accommodate the proposed commercial units, residential flats and houses. Economic benefits would stem from the construction of the new properties both during the construction period and after occupation of the development. The proposal would therefore constitute sustainable development in the planning balance, and it's therefore recommended that planning permission be granted subject to that shouldn't read that. Apologies for that. Subject to the conditions within the committee report and the section 106 agreement. That's the end of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you very much indeed for the detailed presentation. Councillor Monday, you wish to speak.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Melanie, for a detailed presentation. I have to say that the brownfield site is an eyesore in town, and I would welcome it being developed in some guise or another. However, we have heard 3 submissions from the public that really are adverse to the issues that this will cause for residents of Kings Road. I'm of the opinion that the access on Factory Road West for the commercial units, there seems to be a pavement that's being provided, but there doesn't seem to be any road widening. And I do question the safety of vehicles travelling both ways down that road, because it is a very, very narrow road, you know, and it is a very busy road. I'm not sure why we have to have further ingress/egress onto Kings Road, which clearly from the presentation shows that it will impact on the street parking for residents that don't have their own off-road parking. And I'm just questioning why this application didn't have an ingress on Parsonage Street, for instance, opposite the fire station, which would seem much more sensible to me, because that road is a much wider road, visibility is much better, and it would then lessen the impact for this development to any of the residents parking on Kings Road. I'm not going to go into any issue about the number of houses, flats, etc., because we're not considering this. This is a reserved matters thing to look at later on if this application is granted. I would say, though, however, this is yet another development where we have possibly 50 further residents in the town, in a town where doctors' surgery is already overburdened with you know, oversubscribed, and yet we've seen no increase or no amenity to cover all these big developments. So whilst I welcome the S106 or the calculation for that, I'd actually like to see something happening in the town to actually make that happen, so that all these additional residents can have an infrastructure. So I guess that from my point of view, I'm not going to support this application in its current form. I'd like to see the site developed. Melanie, one question I do have is that Mr. Harding in his submission said that flats are 1 parking space plus 0.25 overflow, which the calculation to that seems to be that there aren't enough parking spaces for those flats. So please could you check the calculation, make sure that's correct. But from my point of view, I'm not going to support this application, and would ask members to do likewise until we get a sensible application with a better ingress/egress that doesn't impact on the neighbouring residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Monday. Melanie, would you like to clarify on the parking regulations before I move on, or would you like to do that later?
From memory, I think it depends on whether you round up or round down. But I think what I would like to do, just so that I have got an accurate answer for Councillor Monday, is just to open up the parking standards on my computer and just have a quick look, just so I can run that calculation again, just so that I'm 100% clear.
That's fine. I will now move on and ask Councillor Mann to speak while you're doing that. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think this ticks all the policy boxes as regards redevelopment of the site, so we can support outline permission. We've heard it's a brownfield site. It's in a sustainable location. The homes and flats proposed are acceptable in amenity space terms for future residents. There's no objection from the Environment Agency on contamination or flooding terms. I think the officers are right to disallow the vacant building credit, so some affordable housing will come forward too. Key here, I think, is there's no highways objection. I note what Town Council and residents say about street parking in the area. I mean, anybody who's ever visited the area or tried to visit the area knows all about that. But surely we learned from the report that both the residential and the commercial proposals comply with policy, RLP 56. So I think all we can ask from the developer is that they don't add to the existing problems of parking in the Kings Road area. And if the figures are correct, they are supplying policy standard parking in their proposals. So, yeah, no, this is not to disregard or to say that the parking on-road parking problems don't exist. But as I said, all we can do is to try and make sure that they are not worsened by this proposal. And if the report is accurate, then there should be sufficient parking on site. So I think, again, it's an unbalanced decision, but I think it is a proposal, Madam Chairman, that we can support.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I sort of have two questions really for Melanie. The first question is picking up some of the points that were made in question time about whether or not it would have been possible to have a single access from Parsonage Street. I note that possibly one of the problems with this site has been the difficulties in coming up with an acceptable layout, which is probably why that is a matter which is for determination today. Particularly with trying to arrange the parking, which seems to have been quite difficult to organise. The second question I have, and it's sort of an observation really, it's just with the flats, and I wonder whether you could just take us back to the layout, please, and then I can just explain what I meant.
Bear with me. I'll just is Madam Chairman okay if I share my screen again?
Melanie, please do.
Yep. Councillor Parker, was it the screen at the beginning that you wanted me to share?
Yes, please. The one with the layout.
I'll go back to that one. Bear with me.
Thank you. That's the one.
That's the best one there.
Yeah, it's really with the flats on the top on the left-hand side, as we're looking at it, there is a large area set aside for bins and store.
Mhm.
And it does seem to me that what I think the question that when I first looked at this, it seemed surprising to me is why we're not using that space to provide 3 further flats. And I was wondering whether that was considered and whether that why that would have been rejected. So those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Okay, I think whilst I've got this drawing up, I think I will probably be quite useful to explain the Parsonage Street access question. I mean, first of all, that never came forward as part of the proposal, and of course we can only consider what's put forward as part of the planning application. I suspect, and this is me putting, you know, my view on it in terms of I don't know what the view is of the applicant and the developer who owns the site, but if we look at this drawing here, I think if you were looking to have the access come through here, it would impinge on that last large grassed amenity space, the verge that I showed you some photographs of. So, you know, you'd have to, from a safety point of view, you'd probably be looking for it to be very central, and you'd end up losing, for visibility points of view, you'd end up losing a huge section, I would have thought, of the grass verge to accommodate an access along here. There's, from, you know, what I've picked up over the years in terms of highways position, is that you wouldn't want it too close to either Factory Lane West or equally the mini roundabout, in terms of being able to, you know, avoid those conflicts of lots of vehicles all moving in a small space. So I suspect that may well have been the reason why that wasn't pursued, but equally it really comes down to the fact that that was not on the table as part of this application. It was never suggested by the Highways Authority in terms of when they made comments on the planning application. So it's quite useful being able to have that drawing up to be able to kind of look at the impact, if anything was to come in off of Parsonage Street, because I think it would have a detrimental impact on that grass verge and the trees that sit within that street scene opposite the fire station. So I will stop sharing my screen now and come back on a couple of the other questions that were raised. So, Councillor Parker, your point about the bins and the store. I think the reason why further flats weren't considered is the impact that it would have in terms of the additional number of parking spaces that 3 additional flats would then create, because they would need at least 3 spaces for themselves, and then it would also then perhaps have a knock-on effect in terms of the visitor spaces they would need. So potentially it might have to result in another 4 parking spaces, which it was, you know, it would then eat into the space, the green amenity space that has been set aside for those occupiers. And then going back to the question that Councillor Monday raised about the visitor parking spaces, I have run the calculations, and it is clear actually within the parking standards that it does say that numbers should be rounded up. So there should be 3 visitor spaces provided for the flats, and in this case only 2 are actually provided. So yeah, just coming back on that point.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you very much. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I agree with what Councillor Mann said about the access and the parking. We're sort of caught here a little bit that you know, we don't have any objection from highways, and I hear very much what you know, local representations say. But if we were to refuse it on those grounds, you know, there would be quite a big danger on the appeal front. In terms of the principle, obviously this is a brownfield site, and I know I rattle on a lot about loss of trees and hedges, but here obviously we can actually talk about some biodiversity gain, even albeit that it's an urban site, because obviously it will be significantly greener than it is now. So that's a positive. For me though, I think the biggest problem with this site, and it's referring back to what Councillor Monday said, I mean, for Halstead, Reed, Silverend and Witham and many other places, we keep accruing these Section 106 contributions for the NHS, but we're not actually seeing much delivery. Well, in Braintree maybe, but in many other places, we're not seeing much delivery in terms of the actual expansion of primary care. And so we're getting the extra residents, and the NHS keeps saying it hasn't got the capacity, but we're not necessarily seeing the delivery of enhanced facilities. So I share that, and for another 50 residents, a payment of £8,000. I know that's geared. There's nothing officers can do about that. It's a calculation, but I think it's an ongoing concern that we're seeing these Section 106 racking up. But when are we going to see the substantial increases in local community care? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Bowers.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, I welcome the one-bedroom flats for the affordable housing. Not something we see that often, and definitely a positive with this proposal. I do agree with Councillor Mundy. I'm not sure what Housestead needs to do to get another sort of GP surgery or some improvement in the GP provision. Like Councillor Abbott says, we know there's a formula. We might not agree with the formula, but short of £8,000 does seem sort of very, considering the NHS comments, very sparse. But we do, I think, not to going over old ground, we've addressed that for many years on this committee. Just one question for the officer in regards to the sort of highways situation. I know we've looked at the access and discussed the access. And I appreciate the photos that you showed with Kings Road were from this afternoon. I don't think at any time you'd be able to get a photo that didn't have the parking situations. I just wanted to know in regards to highways, is it would the officer know that highways actually have been out and actually assessed the area and actually made an on-site visit, or would that be through Google Earth that quite often happens? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. I'll ask Melanie to answer that question if she can. She might not be able to.
You preempted me there, Madam Chairman. Unfortunately, I'm not able to let you know, Councillor Bowers, as to whether or not a site visit was made by the highways officer. Yeah, I can't provide any information on that, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll be brief, as Councillor Bowles made a couple of points that I was going to make. An area really familiar to me. I mean, I grew up in House, not too far from this site, and walked past Hunwicks to primary school and secondary school, so I know it reasonably well. Just on the point that obviously the NHS have asked for what would seem a low set amount. Unfortunately, we can't dictate what the NHS ask for. They're fully aware of their situations across not just Housestead but the district, and so there should be more strategic thinking in what they're asking for to allow sustainable increases to their surgery, to allow for the growth within Housestead and the surrounding district. I'm pleased that there's a good number of Section 106 set aside for the KGV playing field, and that at Ramsey Road also. Certainly not to be dismissed that number that's been offered. And just to kind of make the point that Councillor Bowles made, some lower tenure size houses in the Housestead area are welcome, not just in Housestead but to the district. So one-bedroom flats are favourable, and again on a brownfield site. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Mrs. Parker, I will let you come back. We have given this quite a good airing.
Yes, it's just on a small point, Madam Chairman. Thank you. It's just, I noticed the police have made some comments. Would it be appropriate at this stage to put an informative with those comments on this application, or is that really a matter for something for reserve matters?
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Parker. I'll ask Melanie to answer that, and then we'll sum this one up.
Just refresh my memory on what the police said.
You know the page it's on, Councillor Mrs. Parker, to help.
Yes, I'm
Melanie.
just having a look at this. So one of the comments
Page
they
12.
make is about rear parking courts. Unfortunately, because layout is being secured at this stage, if they're successful in terms of the grant of planning permission, then those the layout then would become fixed. So those parking courts would remain. In terms of the lighting and robust access control and visitor entry systems, then yes, that those sort of matters could quite easily be dealt with as an informative on this current application, just to make the applicant aware of those concerns raised by the police.
Thank you, Melanie. Councillor Monday.
Just briefly, Chair, thank you very much for letting me speak for a second time. Melanie, can we just take into account the fact that the calculation for the additional spaces for the flats is taken into consideration for this, please?
You mean additional car parking?
Parking spaces, yes, please. Sorry.
How do you want me to deal with that? Sorry.
I'm not sure the best. It's not going to be an informative, is it?
Right. No. I mean, we as I was saying, the layout is if members are happy to agree with the recommendation, then the layout becomes fixed in terms of where the buildings are, where the car parking areas. So I think members would have to make a decision as to whether or not they are happy with the 2 visitor spaces, or whether they aren't happy with that and insist on having the 3, and then that would have to reflect in the recommendation or the the determination this evening.
Can I come back and say that, aren't we supposed to be providing 3 additional spaces as per our policies? So to accept 2 would be not within policy. It would be my opinion. Thank you.
Melanie, I don't know if Chris, did you want to come in on that or not?
Happy to, Madam Chairman, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So I think as Melanie has set out, obviously the layout is before members this evening for approval. Given the site's location, the amount of parking being provided, acknowledge the point, Councillor Mundy, that you were making. I think we've obviously put the recommendation, a positive recommendation forward this evening on the basis of the parking that's proposed. If members felt strongly on this, it is something that we would either need to defer consideration of the application to go back to seek to renegotiate the layout of the development, or it's obviously members' decision. If members felt strongly about it, then and felt that there was a overdevelopment of the site and inadequate parking provision was being provided, that could form a reason for refusal. Although, given the site's location on a brownfield site in a very sustainable location, I would urge a bit of caution in terms of that direction. But we've obviously put forward a recommendation here this evening, so it's not something I don't think we could recondition, because what we'd be looking at is amending the layout of the development to accommodate that additional space, Councillor Mundy, that you're seeking to try to secure. Hopefully, Madam Chairman, those comments were useful.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Thank you. Councillor Mundy, do you want to do anything, or are you going to sit on your hands?
I guess from my point of view, I accept that you want to urge caution for this. I just feel that you do need to have the right requirement for car parking spaces. I understand that there is a plea from myself to not impact on the people in Kings Road. If this were to be acceptable or accepted this evening, then there would be a clear impact on that. I can't support this application. But if I propose that we defer this whilst the application has the right requirement of car parking spaces, I'm not actually quite convinced I'd get a seconder.
Well, the thing is, you have the option to move an amendment to defer. You also have an option to refuse. It's up to you entirely.
Okay. I think for myself, I would just be against this application, because I don't believe that I would get a seconder for the option to defer.
Right, thank you. I do need a mover and seconder as we're summing up on this. No one has moved this application, and I would need a seconder, and it would be noting also within that the informative on the police comments, please.
I'll move this application, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Parker. Does it find a seconder?
Happy to second, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Thank you very much indeed. Well, members, it has been moved and seconded, and we will be putting an informative for the applicant to note the police comments regarding the parking spaces. the security of this parking spaces. I'm going to put this to the vote now. Councillor Abbott.
For.
Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Horner.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann.
For.
Councillor Monday.
Against.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For.
Councillor Wrench.
For.
Thank you, members. That application has been granted. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the next item, which is 5B, application number 20-01167 54 Coggeshall Road, Earls Colne. We do not have any speakers on this application, so we'll go straight to the presentation, which is going to be made by Chris Badgie. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll just share my screen with the presentation.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, members. So this is an application for the erection of 2 detached bungalow-style dwelling houses accessed off an existing shared private drive. The site is 54 Coggeshall Road in Earls Colne. I'll just run through the plans. I've got a couple of photographs as well. So starting with the location of the site, you can see number 54 is the large triangular, roughly triangular shaped plot there, with the private drive serving a number of existing dwellings to the side. Just an aerial shot there, which shows the location of the 2 new dwellings, actually, the space in between in this location, if you can see my cursor. So you've got the existing dwelling in this location with its access and parking. You have the private drive to the side, which serves these existing properties, and you've got the location in this space here for the 2 new dwellings. Again, just the location plan again. So you've got the application site with the vehicular access outlined in red there. The site outlined in blue is the existing house and the area to be retained as part of the curtilage of that property. And then moving on to the proposed plan. So again, you have the existing dwelling house towards the bottom of the picture, number 54, garaging the access, and then you have the 2 plots proposed. So you have plot 1, first of all, garden to the side, access and parking for the plots off of the private driveway. And then again, you have plot 2 to the side of that, and again, a tandem arrangement for parking. Garden space provided to the rear of that plot. Just in terms of design and layout, so this is the proposed plans for plot 1, both the elevation and the floor plans. So very modestly sized and scaled property. And plot 2 as well. And then just in terms of some street scenes, so just to provide some context, so this is looking back towards from the private driveway back to the front elevation of the proposed 2 units. You can see the other existing cottage to the right-hand side of that street scene image, and you've got the existing dwelling house that you can see behind the 2 plots. And again, to the side of each of the dwellings, you can see the access points for the parking. So just some photos as you come in and as you enter into the private drive. You've got the application site on the other side of this, the vegetation here on the left, and you can see the fencing to the existing properties. Slightly further up, you can see the existing brick wall, and you can just make out here the existing cottage, which is at the end of the driveway. So the application site, again, just to give you bearings, is on the left-hand side. And then a view looking back at the wall. And again, you can just see the dwelling on the other side. You can see the garden area. Just a shot looking back and the 2 existing dwellings on the other side. So in terms of design, the proposals have been designed to be in keeping with the other existing properties within the immediate area. And this is within the plot looking back. So again, a view from the other side of the wall, and you can see the existing cottage on the left-hand side and the existing bungalow on the other side of the private driveway there. So just in terms of key considerations, the site is predominantly located within the development boundary. The corner of the site is clipped, so but the majority of it is located within. So therefore, the principal development is considered to be acceptable. The overall character and appearance of the development is considered to be successful in terms of its appearance. Two very modestly sized and appearing dwellings, which are considered to be in keeping with the 3 existing properties in the immediate locality. Adequate amenity space would be provided for each of the dwellings along with parking, and we're not concerned that the proposal would give rise to any detrimental impacts on existing neighbouring properties, and there's no objections from the Highway Authority as well. As with the first planning application this evening, there is the written update that's been provided for you this evening. So again, just to note the change to the published committee report in terms of 5-year housing land supply position. So since the adoption of the local plan, the position has fallen in terms of our supply position. So the proposal would deliver 2 new properties, which would contribute to the council's housing land supply. And similarly, the adopted local plan and the change to the core strategy policies, some of those will be superseded. And I think in this particular case, the committee report references policy CS1 and policy CS9. So it's important for members to disregard those 2 policies when determining the application this evening. But there's no changes to the recommendation as a result of that update. The proposal is considered to be acceptable and is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions outlined in the report. Happy to answer any further questions, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is in my ward. I cannot see that there are any planning reasons to refuse this, quite honestly. The site is certainly big enough for 2 additional dwellings, and they are, as Chris has said, quite modest in size and design. I have seen and received a number of comments from the parish council and neighbours about access and safety aspects onto Coggeshall Road. However, highways have not objected, which is always something to take into account. And I do agree with officers' comment in the report that the addition of 2 dwellings is not actually going to make a significant difference in terms of safety. There will be a sort of very limited increase in the number of vehicle movements on and off the site onto Coggeshall Road. I note that there is an informative in there to the applicant regarding the footpath, which is good because that's something that's come up, one or 2 comments or objections from people, but that's in there. So all in all, Madam Chairman, I'm happy to support the recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Are you moving it, Councillor Mrs. Spray?
Oh yes, sorry,
sorry.
I should have made that clear. Yes, I am. Thanks, Chairman.
Does it find a seconder before I move on?
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Johnson, did you wish to speak?
No, no, thank you.
Right. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item? No. Well, it has been moved and seconded. It's been moved by Councillor Mrs. Spray. It's been seconded by Councillor Johnson. So I'm going to put this one to the vote. This is for approval. Councillor Abbott.
For.
Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Horner.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann.
For.
Councillor Monday.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For.
Councillor Wrench.
For.
Thank you, members. That has been approved unanimously. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Chris, for your presentation. We now come on to application 5C. This is application 2001484, 83 Chapel Hill, Halstead. Can be found on pages 58 to 84. We have no speakers, so I go directly to the officer to make the presentation. And the presentation is going to be made by Lisa Page. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I will just share my screen. Lovely. So hopefully everybody can now see that. So this is a full application for the erection of 5 dwellings with associated parking and garaging, together with alterations to a previously approved and part implemented scheme for the erection of a replacement dwelling. And the site address is 83 Chapel Hill in Halstead. The application is being reported to Planning Committee in accordance with the transitionary arrangements for the Council's new scheme of delegation, as Halstead Town Council have objected to the application contrary to officer recommendation. Now, as with the other applications, there is a quick update to members, and that has already been circulated to members prior to this evening. That application, the update is really an update in terms of policy adoption and the Council's 5-year housing land supply position. That's already been set out within the previous presentation, so I won't expand on that too much further here. On this particular application, there is a further point to note though, and that's in relation to some missing elements being printed in the agenda, and that's on page 61 of the agenda. Now, officers have had some legal advice on this, and it's not considered to be detrimental to members' consideration of the application. So the missing text does not contain information on any material planning consideration, but rather relates to the setting of the scene for the proposal. And therefore, officers can advise members that they can proceed to determine the application. So on that basis, I shall proceed with the presentation. So here's the location plan. The application site is located on the western side of Chapel Hill and Halstead. It's located adjacent to and behind number 33 and 37 Chapel Hill, and it's located, as you'll see on some later photographs, on an elevated position much higher than the road. There are a number of listed buildings in the vicinity, the public house where my cursor is, and further to the north. On this particular site, outline planning permission has already been approved for the erection of 5 dwellings, and that outline permission approved the access and the layout, with all other matters reserved. So turning to an existing block plan, you can see the existing or the former existing dwelling on there, and a number of outbuildings that are proposed to be demolished. In terms of the proposed site plan, there are 5 dwellings proposed sort of within this formation, and this is a replacement dwelling. So in terms of all of these dwellings, all 6 would be accessed via a shared central access point here onto Chapel Hill. This access remains as per the outline planning permission and remains acceptable. Plots 1 and 2 are fronting onto Chapel Hill. Their parking is located in this tandem formation to the rear. Plot 3 is a further detached property here, also with parking to the side, and a detached office building that we will look at on floor plan shortly. These are 2 further detached buildings that front onto this internal sort of courtyard, road access, and here is the replacement dwelling, which benefits from a rear garage and driveway parking. In terms of looking at the replacement dwelling elevation and floor plans, it's a 4-bed dwelling, 2-storey scale, and very similar in size, scale, form and design to the previously approved replacement dwelling. In terms of floor plan, it provides sitting, dining, family and kitchen room at ground floor, and the 4 bedrooms at first floor. This dwelling, as you can note on the site plan, has the garage space to the rear, and that provides 1 garage space with sort of storage and the driveway parking. In terms of plots 1 and 2, these are the 2 dwellings that are sited on the site frontage. They also are 2-storey scale, which reflects the scale of dwellings in Chapel Hill. Fairly simple in their design and appearance, with a modest front canopy and rear gables. In terms of the floor plans of plots 1 and 2, it's sort of open plan living and downstairs WC, and upstairs there's 3 bedrooms and bathrooms. Plot 3 now, which is located behind plots 1 and 2, is a 1.5-storey dwelling. It's more fragmented in its design, and in terms of materials, it would have a red brick plinth, render and boarding, and a tiled roof. The floor plans of plot 3 show again sort of your living accommodation at ground floor, and 4 bedrooms and bathroom facilities at first floor. Turning now to plots 4 and 5, these are sited at the rear. This is the front elevation that would front onto that access road, and one of the flank elevations. The rear elevations and the other flank elevations there of these dwellings. So in terms of floor plans for plots 4 and 5, fairly open plan living accommodation, integral garage and a home office is allocated for each of the dwellings, and at first floor 4 bedrooms. Now, some sections have been provided here to just show officers and members how the site development integrates with the locality. So these are the existing dwellings here on the right-hand side and here on the left-hand side. So you can see how the scheme has been designed with that transition in terms of roof heights to take account of the natural land levels. These dwellings are sited slightly into the land, and you can see the access, how the access is created there off Chapel Hill. Some further sections here. So this is looking north through the access. So here are those plots 4 and 5 that front onto the access, and here is the flank of the replacement dwelling and its garage. This is also another section taken through the access. So you've got the detached plot 3 here, and plots 1 and 2, the semi-pair that fronts onto Chapel Hill here. And lastly, another section here that is showing the relationship between the access. So here is the access running through, looking towards this wildlife site to the rear. So you've got plot 3 on the left-hand side and plot 4 and 5 on the right. So turning to some photographs now, here are the existing properties on the northern side of Chapel Hill. So the development site is here. The replacement dwelling would be sited here, and plots 1 and 2 along here with the access here. Just another view of where the access would be taken from Chapel Hill. A further photograph here taken from the site looking towards Chapel Hill. So here are the retained dwellings. The replacement dwelling will be sited around here. These are the existing structures that would be demolished on site. Just another photograph taken slightly further back, which shows the condition of the land. Photograph towards the northern boundary, you can see the land sloping down. And this is just a photograph looking to the rear of the site, so to the west across that local wildlife site. This is taken from really the site boundary, looking towards the east now, so back towards Chapel Hill, and you can see the dwelling there which is to the south of the application site. Another photograph of that here that shows the existing access onto the site that would be closed up. And equally now, photograph standing in Chapel Hill, looking back at the application site. So here we are, you can see the full extent of the site frontage. Now, as we heard, there is a policy, there is an update to members this evening that's already been circulated, and that is in regards to policy being adopted. Now, in terms of this application, the main change here is inviting members to disregard policy CS9 when determining the application. There's also an update in regards to 5-year housing land supply, and our position has now changed from 4.59 years to 3.73 years. So officers have reviewed this policy change and change in terms of 5-year housing land supply position, and do not consider that this would change officer recommendation. So in terms of planning balance and the conclusion, the principle of a replacement dwelling and 5 further dwellings has already been accepted by the outline approval. The development would create economic, social and environmental benefits. The access remains as per the outline permission, and further matters in regard to the layout, design, neighbour amenity and ecology matters are considered acceptable, and therefore officer recommendation to members is that planning permission be approved. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you. I don't have any speakers at the moment. No one wants to speak.
Shall I start, Madam Chair?
Yes, thank you, Councillor.
Well, as the report clearly shows, the presentation has reiterated that the principle of residential development on the site is already established. So we've got to look for things like, is it out of scale? Is it unduly prominent? Is it acceptable in highway safety terms? And I think that the report and presentation demonstrates that those 3 boxes at least are ticked. So I'm happy to move officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Does it find a seconder before I move on?
Councillor Mrs. Spray, I'll second, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got you down to, I've got Councillor Mundy to speak next, and I come back to you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Councillor Monday.
I'd just like to say that that Councillor Mann is quite correct in his what he says about the fact that there are no bodies that are objecting to this. The access is as it is. And I accept the fact that the town council feel it's a loss of countryside, but we're not here to comment about that because the outline application has already been agreed for 5 houses. So whilst I will support the application. I find it's the houses are interesting, and the replacement house, although it's slightly different footprint, doesn't have any detriment to the overall site itself. So I don't want to promote NIMBYism here whatsoever, and I don't find that there's any particular issue or any reason for us to doubt that this is an acceptable development.
Thank you, Councillor Mundy. Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was only going to jump in if Councillor Mann hadn't. Happy to yes, support the recommendation for approval on this. We say with principle is established and we have the very relevant appeal decision. So no reason really not to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Does anyone else wish to speak? I'm just watching the chat. No, it doesn't appear that anyone else does. So I'm going to put this to the vote. This is a recommendation for approval. Councillor Abbott.
For.
Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Horner.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann.
For.
Councillor Monday.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For.
Councillor Wrench.
For.
Thank you, members. That has been agreed, has been approved unanimously. Now brings us on to application 5D. This is application 20018804, Little Cattley's Farm, Cattley Road, Whitecombe. Can be found on pages 85 to 100. Once again, I have no people wishing to make a statement on this application, and the officer will be Lisa Page once again. So over to you, Lisa. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Please bear with me just whilst I get that presentation. Apologies, bear with me. I'm trying to get it. Just having trouble getting back into Zoom, but one moment. Lovely. Right. Apologies for that. Let me share my screen. And I will make that full screen. Lovely. Thank you. Hopefully everybody can see this. So it's a full application for the demolition of the existing agricultural building and erection of one 5-bed 2-storey dwelling house. The site address is Little Cattley's Farm, Cattley Road in Whitecombe. So similar to the other applications, prior to me just starting the presentation, members will be aware of the update in terms of adopted policy and our 5-year housing land supply, and I'll address that later on sort of in the update to members before the planning summary. So in terms of the location plan here, the application site is located within open countryside. It's some 1.5 miles to the northeast of Whitecombe. This is the application site here, which you'll see later on when the red edge is shown on the block plan. So you've got the existing agricultural building here and some of the land around it. And this is the adjacent Little Cattley's Farm. So here again on the block plan, you can see the site measures approximately 0.1 hectares, consists of an agricultural building and silo. That silo is just seen here on the aerial photograph. It's sited adjacent to the dwelling known as Little Cately's Farm. The site benefits from this shared access with Little Cately's Farm, with a gravel driveway, and there's a public right-of-way that's shown on a later plan. It runs north to south, generally along the line of the driveway. In terms of some existing elevations of the barn or the building, you can see it's 2-story scale predominantly. It measures around 16 by 15.5 metres. Some photographs now just to put the building in terms of context. So this is the building on the right-hand side here, taken from the roadside, in the existing residential property here on the left. And this is just another photograph of the agricultural building. So you can see the 2-story scale of it, sort of fronting onto that road. This is the flank elevation, so the elevation that would be fronting or facing Little Cately's farmhouse. And this is that side elevation, and sort of turning to the rear, you can see the roof slopes right down to sort of single story at the rear, and the silo just sited behind. So members will note from the committee report that there's a prior approval already granted on the building for a change of use to one residential dwelling house. So that utilises the entire building, so it would be 2-story in scale. It has 2nd floor accommodation, and members will note that officers consider this prior approval consent is a material consideration to which significant weight is assigned. So turning now to the proposed block plan, you can see that the siting of the proposed dwelling is in a very similar location to the barn that's to be demolished. It would be a 5-bed dwelling, and access would remain shared. On this plan, you can also see that public right-of-way that's shown dashed here, so that would be unaffected and would not be altered as part of the application. Now, this plan here is just put on really for a comparison between the prior approval site plan, so showing the existing barn on site, and the proposed site plan. So really just showing sort of the differences in terms of the impact that the change of use application would have in relation to the demolition and new build application. So turning now to some proposed floor plans. The dwelling will provide open plan living at ground floor with a separate study, and at 1st floor 5 bedrooms with bathrooms are proposed. In terms of elevation, it's again 2-story in scale, fairly simple fenestration, and the dwelling would be constructed in timber cladding above a brick plinth, and roofing materials are clay tiles. So as we've heard, there is a policy update to members in terms of adopted policy, and what that means is that members are advised to disregard policy CS9 of the core strategy. There's also an update, as we've heard, in terms of 5-year housing land supply position, and the council's position changes from 4.59 years to 3.73 years, but officers are content that this would not change the officer recommendation. So in terms of a planning summary and the planning balance, the site is sited outside of an identified town or village boundary. It is within a countryside location where the principle of the proposed development is not supported. However, approval has already been given for the existing barn on the site to be converted to a dwelling via the prior approval process, and that change of use is considered highly likely to proceed if the current application was refused, and this is a material consideration of significant weight. The dwelling proposed is considered to be of a higher quality design than the prior approval dwelling, and the floor area created is also smaller, and the associated residential curtilage and parking layout created via this planning application is considered to be more logical than the prior approval application, and would provide for better amenity for future occupiers. The approved scheme would also be no less sustainable in terms of its location than the scheme we're looking at currently, and other material considerations in respect of ecology, amenity of future occupiers and neighbours, and highway matters are acceptable, and therefore officers recommend to members that planning permission be granted subject to conditions. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Mann, you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Very interesting application this. I don't know if it's sort of breaking new ground. as a prior approval consent for the change of use of an existing but redundant agricultural building to a dwelling house. And this is an application to demolish that said building, but to build a new dwelling, completely new dwelling, to look like an Essex barn. Now, I think I follow the officer's view of the implications of this, but is there any precedent? Has this device been used anywhere else within the district, that we're allowing the demolition of a building that has a consent for a change of use, and allowing a new build? So is there precedent, or is this the first time that we are sort of proposing this?
Thank you, Councillor Mann. I'll ask Lisa if she knows the answer to that question.
Thank you. I couldn't answer in terms of Braintree District Council if there are other recent examples where we have sort of taken this stance. I don't know on that particular point, but there are numerous examples sort of within sort of this area, so the east really, in terms of the weight to be applied. So there's a lot of case law and appeal decisions that in terms of this sort of realistic fallback position. And on this application, we've looked at some recent case law, which is sort of detailed as a summary really within the committee, officer committee report, that details that that case law position. So obviously that's significant weight is applied to that. Now officers have had a look at that, and we consider that it would be highly likely that the prior approval scheme would be built out if this application was refused. So that's where we've sort of undertaken that planning balance really, and given significant weight to that sort of realistic fallback position.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Members, before I move on, I'd just like to notify everyone that Councillor Abbott has left the meeting because he feels unwell, but we are still quorate. I just hope he feels better soon. So now we'll move on with our meeting. And next person I have to speak is Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Again, another one in my ward. Well, I would agree with Councillor Mann that it is unusual, but I think we would be on sort of shaky ground, if you like, in refusing this evening, because there is the prior approval, and the fallback position was that if the applicant couldn't go ahead with this, then they could, you know, do the conversion. But I do note the officer's comments that they feel that the quality and the design is of a high standard of what is proposed here, which is obviously something good to be said for it. I can't see any other planning reasons to refuse it, so I am happy to move officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Does that find a seconder before I move on, please?
I will second it, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Parker. I've got you to speak next, so I will let you speak now, please.
Thank you. Yes, no, I agree with Councillor Mann. I don't recall an application like this before where we have are recommending a granting permission based on a fallback position. But I do agree with the officer's analysis. I completely agree with her analysis. And the position of the fallback position is yes, I mean, as she has pointed out, that carries significant weight in the planning balance. And given that, when one looks at the alternative proposal that's put before us for effectively a better design, I do agree with a better and a smaller design. I do agree with her conclusion that this application should be granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Parker. Councillor Wrench.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's just a question to Lisa here, really, regarding if this if we didn't have the fallback position here before us, and it was just an application before that decision was made to demolish the barn, what would have been officer recommendation then? And I am concerned that is this now going to set a precedence in the future where people will get around this as a step to actually get what they actually really want. So I would be interested to know if this was a planning tonight before us for demolition, what would have officer recommendation been if that's what was before us, instead of using the fallback position to get where they are? Thank you.
It's a good question, but it's a tough one for Lisa.
If I'm honest, I think I'm probably not in the position today to sort of give you what an officer recommendation would have been for a sort of speculative proposal that, you know, we haven't considered in any detail. I see the point of your questioning. I think I probably would highlight that. I think within the officer report, we have sort of acknowledged the location, and that we do not feel it's the most sustainable location. So I think that might sort of answer some of the questions you're sort of trying to put to us in regard to the merits of what that application may, you know, what officers may have thought to the merits of such an application. I think the difficulty is really we have to have regard to sort of that fallback position and whether it is a realistic fallback position. And I can see the reservation really in terms of, is this going to set a precedent for other sides? But I think what we would be saying is that each case would be on its own merits, and we would need to really be looking at the details of any other subsequent application where they may have a fallback position or, you know, already granted, and we would really need to sort of see how much weight we can apply to that in terms of a realistic fallback position. So I think it's really each case on its own merits, and I couldn't really provide too much comment on terms of how we would have considered an application if there wasn't that prior approval already granted on the sites.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Chris, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to say something in addition to what Lisa said. So I think this is, I think it is right that we have to consider these on each case really on their merits. I think Councillor Wrench is right to raise the concern in the sense that there is a potential loophole here to establishing fallback positions in locations which are unsustainable, where we ordinarily wouldn't support new applications, which is why I think each case we need to look carefully at what that fallback position comprises and whether or not we would support something in this case. This is a slightly different one in the sense that actually design appearance of the building is better than what was secured with the prior approval. There would hopefully be limited examples of this, but I think the concern is right to raise, and unfortunately, obviously, the prior approval route is a route that is available, subject to meeting the criteria. So we will have to look very carefully, but I think that the key thing here, as Lisa's explained, we have closely examined the fallback position. We do think there's a realistic chance that that would be implemented, and actually the quality of the scheme that's come forward pursuant to this application, smaller footprint, better design, and being pragmatic on this particular application, we feel it's the right recommendation to put to members. But that won't ordinarily always be the case, because the policy position, as I think Councillor Mann was alluding to originally, is such that you wouldn't support this approach being taken pursuant to development plan policies ordinarily. So it is on the basis of the fallback position that the recommendation is before you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Hopefully those comments are helpful.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I'm sure it is. Well, this application has been moved and seconded. It was moved by Councillor Mrs. Spray, seconded by Councillor Mrs. Parker. And I'm now going to put that to the vote. This is for approval. Councillor Abbott has left us, so he's not. Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Horner.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann.
Abstain.
Oh dear.
Thank you. Councillor Monday.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For.
Councillor Wrench.
For.
Thank you. Members, that has been granted with 1 abstention. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Now we move on to item 5E, which is application 20020014, land opposite Jaspers Green, Shelford. And we do have a speaker for this application. And the speaker is, sorry, I have papers everywhere. It's Mrs. Julia Bruce Smith. I welcome Mrs. Julia Bruce Smith to make her comments, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Right. Okay. The residents and the parish council object to this revised scheme at the site opposite Jaspers in Jaspers Green, as they have objected all along to the overdevelopment of this site. It is still our view that the application should never have been approved in the first place for the following reasons: detrimental impact upon residential amenities. The decision has had and continues to cause demonstrable harm in relation to the loss of green space, privacy, and the right to enjoy a quiet and safe environment. 2, overdevelopment. The site is not and never has been big enough for the original proposal 19011744, with little space for landscaping, car parking, and sewage waste or amenity space. Increasing the accommodation and car parking spaces completely disregards the need for space for water treatment systems and soakaways. Plot 3 is actually only 4.01 metres from the boundary with the granary, not 4.7 metres, and so questions should be asked over the size of amenity space, as this cannot be as stated. A soakaway for this property could not meet the criteria of being 2.5 metres from the boundary. Privacy. The granary is severely impacted in this regard, and with the addition of further windows, other neighbouring properties will also be negatively impacted, suffering a loss of privacy. The design of the whole site does not afford adequate privacy for the occupants of the new buildings or of adjacent residential properties. Article 8 of the Human Rights Act states that a person has the substantive right to respect for their private and family life. The granary garden affords full views of the downstairs rooms of the new properties, as predicted. 4, car parking. Additional cars will lead to the site becoming even more like a car park than has already been agreed. The site is not big enough to accommodate additional car parking, and therefore increasing the bedroom allocation in the semi-detached properties will have a further negative impact on the natural and historic environment. If this were sustainable development in any sense of the word, there would be no need for additional car parking, as adequate local amenities and a meaningful bus service would mean there was no need for multi-car households. Tier 3 villages. Jaspers Green would previously have fallen into this category. Prior to the collapse of the local plan, Braintree District Council's own statement when considering the tests of sustainable development was, these will not normally be met by development within a 3rd tier village. And yet you allowed this development to go ahead. You are now considering further compounding the damage to this quiet historic hamlet by allowing two-storey development at odds with all surrounding properties. All of our objections have been repeatedly ignored and dismissed, and we feel certain that it was never intended that presumptive permission be granted in locations where total reliance on private vehicles would be the norm. Sewage. There is no mains sewer in Jaspers Green. The officer's condescending report, which acknowledges concerns where the sewerage would be dealt with, is too little, too late. The planning portal records a total of 19 references to the lack of main sewer in Jaspers Green across 3 separate applications, which falsely claimed mains sewers would be used. This error in the current application was only corrected on the 22nd of January 2021, following the perseverance of a resident who entered into direct email communication with the planning officer. The Planning Committee granted permission in June 2020 based on an incorrect, misleading claim signed and declared as true and accurate on the 19th of September 2019. How can this be within planning protocol? Given that the site is totally overdeveloped, current legislation, as set out by the Environment Agency, will make the use of water treatment systems extremely difficult. Clear water runoff from a water treatment system can only be into a ditch that is free-flowing 12 months of the year. There isn't one. Additional bathrooms compound this problem. Is it legal to make false statements on a planning application form? Access. All application forms, including this one, have stated that there will be no alteration to the pedestrian and vehicle access proposed from the public highway. This is untrue, as the plans indicate quite clearly that the access will, in fact, cross with the access to the granary and the privately owned farmland beyond. No consideration has been given to existing deeds and the easement which allows free access over the verge to reach the properties which are now behind the development site. Additional vehicles at this site will have a further detrimental impact on existing users. Ownership. The application form states that the applicant is the owner of all of the land to which the application relates. We dispute that, as the applicant does not own the verge over which access to the site is required. Flooding. Residents who have lived in Jaspers Green all their lives have never seen the ditch on the verge flood before. This winter, however, there was terrible flooding as the paddock has now been concreted over. How will this be resolved? Throughout this whole process, we have asked many questions. We have never had any answers. We can only assume that this is because the council has also not got the answers, which suggests that the developer, Essex Village Properties, is ahead of the curve, so to speak. This is not democracy, and Jaspers Green has lost valuable green space and any voice. We believe, as a community, this application should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bruce Smith, for your comments. I know you had 6 minutes because you were representing other people in your area, and I thank you for your statement. Thank you very much indeed for attending. I hope you'll be able to listen to the rest of the application. We'll now come on to the presentation, and this is going to be made by Mel, and it can be found on pages 101 to 125.
Good evening again, members. As mentioned by Chris and Lisa beforehand, and also myself, there have been some updates since the agenda was printed. With this application specifically to do with policy considerations and our 5-year land supply, and specifically, as mentioned by previous officers, in this regard, policy CS9 of the core strategy has been superseded, and therefore members are advised to disregard this policy. With regards to our 5-year land supply, sorry, excuse me. With regards to our 5-year land supply, the published committee report indicates that it is 4.59. However, this has now changed to 3.73. And then a further update, as referred to by Lisa in her presentation, is there was a section of the report that was missing from the published agenda. However, officers do not consider this to be detrimental to the members' consideration of the application. The missing text does not contain information on any material planning consideration and relates to the setting of the scene of the proposal. Therefore, officers can advise members that they can proceed to determine the application this evening. Right, moving on to the presentation. So the application before you this evening is a revised scheme for 3 dwellings alongside with ancillary vehicle access, parking, landscaping and other associated works. Members may remember this application from June last year, summer of last year. It came before you, the original planning application, and the details of that is contained within the officer report. The application site here is detailed in red. Within Jaspers Green, the main road runs through Jaspers Green and then forks in the centre here and members may be aware, if they know the site, there is an area of grass at the front here with a number of trees. I have got some photographs of that coming up later on in the presentation. Sorry, members. Oh, tickle. So moving on to the next slide, this shows you the development that was approved last summer for 3 properties, 1 detached house, and which is plot 1, and then plots 2 and 3, which is a pair of dwellings. I think probably what I should have done is put both site plans on the same slide, but there we go. The main differences between what was approved in terms of the site plan and what's proposed, I'll just move on to the second slide, is the addition of a parking space behind the 2 approved spaces for plot 2 and an additional space here for plot 3. The application report also sets out a number of changes to the roofs of the approved properties, particularly plots 2 and 3 in relation to the insertion of additional windows. The next few slides will go through those changes. So these are the approved floor plans for plots 2 and 3, the pair of houses. And as you can see, there is only a ground and first floor. Moving on to the next slide, these are the proposed plans. There isn't a huge amount of difference on the ground and first floor for plots 2 and 3. However, you may be able to see, if you look close enough, that the existing staircase that is proposed to connect the ground and the first floor then runs up and connects the second floor, which is shown on this next slide. And so you can see an additional bedroom with an ensuite is proposed within the roof space of the approved dwelling. As indicated within the officer report, the size and scale of the actual proposed dwelling, so their height and footprint, remains the same as previously approved. Moving on to the next slides, we can see these are the approved elevations. So this is the front elevation of plots 2 and 3. This is the end elevation of plot 3. This is the rear elevation of plots 2 and 3 and the flank elevation of plot 2. So the proposed elevations, the additions is a roof light to the front of plot 2 and a small casement window in plot 3. On the side elevation of plot 3 are 2 roof lights. And then moving on to the back, we have 2 additional roof lights in plot 2 and 1 casement window in the gable there for plot 3. As you can see, these are the drawings that have been resubmitted for plot 1, but there are no changes to plot 1, but it's a brand new planning application, and so these details do need to be submitted. And these are the elevations for plot 1 where there are no changes. The next few slides show you photographs, and I took these fairly recently because I was aware that the site has progressed since I first visited before Christmas. So these are photographs looking towards. So this was the area of grass that I pointed out on the block plan, and the trees are located to the front of the properties. So this is plot 1, the detached house, and then in the background there is plots 2 and 3. And then moving along the road, a more central photograph of plot 1. And then this is looking towards the granary, which is a neighbouring property located at the back here. This is the front of plots 2 and 3. And then this is looking from the other direction towards the centre of Jasper's Green. So in the foreground, you can see plots 2 and 3 and plot 1 in the background. And there's my car. This would be the area roughly where my car is parked, actually, of the additional parking space that's proposed for plot 3, and then 2 further spaces that were previously approved would lie beyond where my car is parked. And then this is the shared access that was referred by the speaker. So if you continue straight on, that's the farmer's access. And then just in here where you can see some tire marks where they turn, this is the driveway access for the granary that then runs behind the length of the site, or the width. So again, this shows some details of the dimensions to the boundary of the site to the south, and officers are content that the position of the dwellings hasn't changed since the last application. There were some issues raised last time and concerns raised this time in terms of the impact of the proposals in relation to particularly the land owned by the granary and the additional windows. So I have reproduced the slide that you may remember from the presentation from last year. I was also able to get a photograph over the fence from the development site. This is the grassed area, and you can just about see you can see that the bottom of the photograph is the driveway that runs up behind the application site and serves the granary. So by way of a summary, on the right page, the site is located south of Jasper's Green in an area of countryside between Panfield and Shalford. There's a listed building located to the east and another to the north. The principle of developing the site for one dwelling was established by the allowed appeal in December 2018. Members may well be aware of that, and the appeal decision was appended to my committee report. Within the context of Jasper's Green and the appeal decision, which allowed for one dwelling, the development of the application site for 3 dwellings was not objected to, and permission was granted in June 2020 under the reference number 17-01744/4. Officers raised no objections to the proposed alterations to the car parking and additional windows, and officers are content that the proposed dwellings would maintain acceptable relationships with all neighbouring properties. The proposed development would therefore constitute sustainable development in the planning balance, and it's therefore recommended that planning permission is granted. That's the end of my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for the presentation, and to the public speaker from the Parish Council. I just want to deal with something. I don't think the local plan collapsed. Section 1 has been agreed, and Section 2 will be opened to public inquiry inspection by an inspector in a matter of weeks. So I think we have to be a little bit careful about the terminology we use when describing the process. I appreciate on certain planning applications, emotions run high. But in relation to the actual planning application, I appreciate the points made about a main sewer and flooding. I do know from my experience that in rural and in semi-rural locations, very often you're not on the main sewer network, and that's one of perhaps a slight disadvantage, which sometimes is offset by many other advantages of living in a rural or semi-rural location. But with regard to the points made by the public speaker, are we happy with the sewer arrangements, if I could ask the officer? And secondly, points were made about flooding, and yes, I'm no weather expert, but towards the end of autumn and the winter, it has been a particularly wet autumn and winter. If the officer could just comment on both the sewer and the flooding situation to perhaps allay some concerns that the local community may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Cunningham, we're getting a gurgling sound while you're speaking. It sounds as if you're in water. I don't know if you have a problem with your connection. But I will ask the officer if she can respond to your. We did hear your questions, it's all right, but I just thought I'd tell you what you sound like. Can I ask Melanie if she can answer the question regarding the sewer, please?
Yes, I'll just revert to Christopher Padgett on those couple of questions.
Thank you. Chris, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just on the point, so yeah, conscious the point was raised during the public speaker's statement. So the application form submitted with this application indicates surface water to be discharged by way of a soakaway, and in terms of foul sewerage, the application form indicates a package treatment plant is proposed to be utilised. that information is really put forward for information. They're not matters that we would concern ourselves as part of the planning process. They're more matters that would be considered under the building regulations and other regulations as referred to. So just to make that point clear, and also there was also a further point in terms of issue around queries, questions in relation to site ownership and property deeds. Again, these are not matters for members this evening. That's a separate civil matter that really needs to be taken up with the applicant separately. The grant of plan permission does not override the ability to implement such permission. You need the control of the site to be able to do that. So that isn't a matter that members need to concern themselves this evening. And sorry, Councillor Cunningham, I think the third point, or the second point rather, that you raised was just in relation to flooding. So in connection with that, this isn't in an area of flood risk, and therefore we're satisfied on that basis. The size of the scheme is not such that we would consult with the county council as local lead flood authority either, because it's a minor development. So under 10 dwellings effectively falls within that category where we wouldn't seek advice from the local lead flood authority. So hopefully, Madam Chairman, those points are helpful.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If I may just come back on that, apologies, I may have inadvertently spoken and suggested that the member of the public was actually from the parish council when in fact she was speaking on behalf of residents, so I apologise for that. With those answers from the officers, and I thank Chris for that, I'm very happy to move officer recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Does it find a seconder before I move on?
I'll second Chairman's Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. I've got Councillor Mrs. Parker wishes to speak, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, just a further question, please, for Melanie, in relation to the garden size, because obviously, can't remember which, whether it's 2 or 3, but one of the car parking spaces is going to have to take up part of the garden. And obviously the other issue is as they're going to have their own sewage treatment plants, that will also have to take up part of the garden. So will the garden size be adequate, taking those two things out of account, taking those two things into account? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Parker. Melanie, can you answer, please?
Yes. So within the officer report, actually on page 113, it does deal with the loss of the square meterage that the parking space, the extra parking space it proposes. So I've calculated it to be about 16 square meters. But despite this loss, the garden would still be 140 square meters, which is in excess of what the Essex Design Guide requires for this size of property, which is 100 square meters. So, and in terms of the sewerage plant or the treatment, from my own personal experience, living off mains, so to speak, is that our septic tank is in the ground, and if you didn't know it was there, apart from the odd smell sometimes, you wouldn't know it was there. So it doesn't actually take up, you don't lose any space. And I have some nice daffodils growing up around it for some reason. And I wouldn't expect that would have any impact on actual garden area. And as I say, the actual proposed additional parking space, despite that intruding into the garden, there would still be 140 square meters of private garden space left for property.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I was happy to second approval for this. There has been an awful lot of comment around regarding work that started on the site, but I think we need to remember that what we're looking at this evening, although it is a full application, the only differences, I believe, between this and the application that we granted approval for last year are some roof lights, 1 or 2 additional windows, and some internal alterations to two of the properties from 3-bedroom to 4-bedroom. So some relatively minor external additions that we are being asked to consider this evening. The other point I think I just want to make about highways comments is that there are no objections from highways, and according to Mel's report, they actually made a site visit, so they've been out and had a look, which doesn't always happen. So no objections from highways. So I think that's all I have to say, Madam Chairman. I'm happy to second approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. I have no one else indicating a wish to speak, so I'm going to put this one to the vote now. It is up for approval. It's been moved by Councillor Cunningham and seconded by Councillor Mrs. Spray. Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Horner.
Against.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann.
For.
Councillor Monday.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For.
And Councillor Wrench.
For.
Thank you, members. That has been approved with 1 vote against. Thank you very much indeed. We now move on to our final application this evening. And this is application 5F, application number 20-01374HH, Pantiles, the Street, Ashton. The application can be found on pages 126 to 142. And I do have 2 people that wish to make a statement on this application. The first person wishing to make a statement is Mr. Neil Hendry from Longways Cottage, Ashton. Good evening, Mr. Hendry, and you have 3 minutes to make your statement.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Good evening. I'd like to begin by asking members a question. What is it we value most when we step out into our gardens? Surely it is peace and quiet and open air. We have a small but lovely garden, and during COVID especially, it is our place of refuge, our peaceful retreat. But if this application for Pantiles is approved, then 3 out of 4 of our boundaries will have a roadway directly adjacent to it. The street to the front, the main Pantiles access drive immediately to the side, and the new proposed access drive and turning area reached via a 90-degree turn alongside our rear garden fence, leading to the new 3-bay garage close to our summer house and small garden office. And there are some planning law issues with the existing and proposed 3-bay garages, which may be a material consideration. Members need to be aware that there is a glaring omission in the officer's report to the committee. The major impact on us would be noise, a material planning consideration. In their report, the officers have failed to address noise impacts on us and our neighbours as motorbikes and cars drive around the perimeter of our garden. Pantiles' proposed garage location and access drive arrangement goes against all planning norms in Ashton. Why should Pantiles then be given an exception? Ashton Parish Council realised this and objected to the location of the garage because of the impacts on the neighbours. The officers decided to go against Ashton Parish Council, which is why this application is being considered at this committee meeting tonight. So why were noise impacts on neighbours not mentioned at all in the officer's report section, impact on neighbour amenity, or in the conclusion? A Freedom of Information request to BDC received yesterday provides evidence that the officers paid lip service to my objection statement number 3, which raised noise impact issues. This is reflected in their report for committee. The only mention of noise is in the initial list under representations. The conclusion states that this is an agreeable scheme that introduces no detrimental harm on grounds of design and appearance, impact on neighbours. This is factually incorrect. There would be detrimental harm. If officers had addressed the material planning consideration of noise, they would have had to conclude that the current proposals for Pantiles could not be supported. By avoiding these issues and not mentioning or including noise impacts in the main body of the report for members, they're painting a false picture. Neither ourselves or Ashton Parish Council or our neighbours have raised any significant objections to the proposals for the main residential component of this application. We are not saying no to any development. We just want to see a proposal that takes account of the neighbours and addresses the issues of noise. And for these reasons alone, we request that members refuse this application. Finished.
Thank you, Mr. Hendry. Thank you very much for your statement. Thank you. We now come along to the final statement this evening, and that is being made by Mr. Justin Kingwell from April Cottage. Mr. Kingwell. Mr. Kingwell, you are muted. I know earlier you said you were having...
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes.
Oh, sorry, I'm working off my phone. I'm working away. Sorry,
Yes,
so I'm
I
having
did
a little
realise
difficulty.
that. That's why I was giving you plenty of time.
Oh, no problem. Right, I'll read my statement. 2 seconds.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We have 3 major concerns. First, the windows on the side elevation overlooking our rear garden and invading our privacy. Even if they have obscured glass, they will be open at times. Second, the garage location directly at the end of our garden and the noise from the motorbikes and cars, which will disturb our peace. Third, the access drive and the turning area in front of the garden and the impact of noise on our back garden. These are the same objections that were raised by Asham Parish Council and our neighbours. Noise is a material planning consideration, which the officers have failed to address in the Pantiles design and in their report to the committee. My neighbour Neil Hendry told me yesterday that the FOI response he received from the District Council contains evidence in emails that officers had failed to notice 2 large sections in his objection statement number 3, which deal with objections to Pantiles' proposed car parking, access drive, garage location, and the major noise impacts. Planning committee members need to know that when they read the officer's report, that it is balanced and accurate. This report to the committee is not. There is a gaping hole in it because it is missing a major section as it fails to address the material planning consideration of noise on us. And the objections raised by Asham Parish Council mention the impact on neighbours. Noise would be a major impact if this application was approved. The reason this application is being considered by the committee tonight is because the officers chose to go against the objections raised by Asham Parish Council. So you would expect the officers' report to address the reasons why they think this layout and proposals are acceptable and how they have mitigated noise impacts, but they don't. They avoid the issue altogether. My question is why? The officers have not done their job properly. Had they read my neighbour's objection statement properly, they would have realised that noise is a major concern with this application. If this application is approved, it will cause a negative impact on all of our lives. And we are not against any redevelopment of Pantiles, but these proposals have failed to address the objections that we share with Asham Parish Council and Longways Cottage. For these reasons, members should ask the applicant and the officers to go away and think again, and they should refuse this application.
Thank you, Mr. Kingwell, for your statement.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. That's the end of speakers, members. Now I come to the presentation, and the presentation is going to be made by Chris Padgey. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully the presentation's appeared. Just before I start the presentation again, just for members to note the update provided on this application in relation to the change of the policy position and specifically the core strategies policies that have been superseded following the adoption of the shared strategic Section 1 local plan a week last Monday. So the application is referred to by the two public speakers. This is an application for extensions and alterations along with the erection of an outbuilding at a property known as Pantiles, located off of the street in Ashen. So several different elements. So the description development here, erection of a part 2-storey and part single-storey side and rear extension, alterations to materials, fenestration, a new front porch, and as referred to by the two public speakers, the erection of a replacement ancillary outbuilding. I'll take you through the plans, and I've got some photographs as well to show you the site, so please bear with me while I do that. So we have the location plan of the site here, edged in red. So you can see the existing property, Pantiles, is the building closest to the street. You have the existing garage, which is the second building within the red line, which is located slightly further back. Just for context, extract from the local plan that just shows the development boundary and also the conservation area. So you'll see, certainly in terms of the development boundary, the site is located within. The proposal here is obviously for extensions and alterations to an existing residential property, and then you've got the outbuilding as well. Moving through, so the existing site plan, which shows the arrangement. So the garaging at the moment is accessed via the front of the site through some gates, and then you've got the garaging to the right. So part of the existing structure is already located behind the nearby property. And then the existing elevation plans that show the appearance of the existing property, and the floor plans, and then the roof plan. So the proposals, now this is just the full extent of the proposals. I've got some plans that go into more detail on each of these because this was the plan that was submitted. So a number of different elements. So if I start with the proposed layout that shows this more clearly, we have various additions. We obviously have the front porch to the front of the property, the rear gable proposed here, the linked extension, which links the dwelling to the existing structure, and then you've got the alterations to the existing structure here, and then this is the location of the proposed new outbuilding. So again, just moving around the different elements of the proposal. So these are the proposed elevations that show the new proposed front porch, the alterations to the existing building and the link, and then the side elevation here. And moving around, so the rear elevation, so you can see here the new gable proposed in this location, the proposed linked extension and the alterations to the existing structure here, and then the side elevation. So Mr. Kingwell referred Mr. Hendry referred to the side elevation and the windows proposed. So you have a window here to a bathroom and a window here to the dressing room area, which links in with condition 4 of the recommendation this evening. So these are the two windows that would face towards the adjacent properties, and these are recommended to be obscure glazed and fixed above 1.7 metres in height. So just to give you your bearings, but this is the new gable element, and then this is the side-on elevation of the existing altered structure, the former garage building. And again, here you can see the front porch, just for context. And then the proposed floor plan, so you can see the arrangement of the accommodation that is proposed. And again, just to focus in on the first floor plan here, just again to give you the context, so the elevation plan we're looking at, it was the side window here to the bathroom and the side window to the dressing room. It's worthy to note that the dressing room also has a window proposed on the rear elevation of the gable that we'd have seen from the rear elevation as well. And then the proposed roof plan. And then the outbuilding. So this shows the elevations, the rear, the side, and the front elevation, the roof form of the proposed outbuilding. Okay, just bear with me with the photographs because I think it's just important to get some context here. So showing the front of the site, so you've got the adjacent property to the right-hand side. So moving slightly forward, you can see the gates there that lead to the rear of the site. And you can just see the existing garage into the rear. Gates now open, garaging clearly in view. And again, and then moving around to the rear of the property. So here you can see the location where the second gable was proposed, and this is the area where the linked extension effectively would be provided. And then you've got the existing garaging there to the left. Just by way of context, the adjacent church. Now this is a view to the side. So again, you've got the gable in this location. You can just see the garaging on the right-hand side here. Similarly, slightly further back, so you can see the paved area here in front of the garage area, and which is already turning behind the existing property. View slightly further back, so again, you can see the side of the existing building, and clearly a car in the background as well. View of the rear garden, so looking back from where the outbuilding, looking back towards the garden, and then a few views just around. So again, you can see the existing house, the outbuilding, and car. This shows the location in the corner here of the proposed outbuilding, and then one of the rear of the property. So if I just leave it on the proposed layout plan, so what we are talking about here is extensions to existing domestic property. So as set out in the report, there are a number of different elements proposed as part of this application. It's noted that it is a large extension with quite a number of additions and alterations being proposed. But taking each element on their own, it's considered that these are both acceptable, taking each element, but also cumulatively. Although it is a larger extension to the existing dwelling, the proposal is considered to be acceptable. No concerns are raised in terms of the heritage impact, in terms of the design and appearance, and actually it's considered that the changes would improve the appearance of the property, certainly from the street. The key element really probably to focus in on is the proposed outbuilding, and here we've considered the relationship between the outbuilding and neighbouring properties, both in terms of its design and height and appearance, but also the siting of that building. Noted the concerns, however, it is considered that the proposal was acceptable given where it is located. The other key issue which was raised during the statements was the point about noise. So absolutely understand the concern, and both speakers are right that this is a material planning consideration. I think the key point here, though, in response to that, is this is a householder application. This is a domestic structure. This is domestic garaging. We're not talking about a commercial enterprise that would be operating from the site. And while it's accepted that there will always be some disturbance to neighbouring properties, given proximity distances and so forth, it's not considered that this would be so detrimental to warrant the refusal of planning permission. So the application is recommended for approval this evening, subject to the conditions outlined in the report, which, as I mentioned, includes condition 4 relating to the obscure glazing requirement and the opening restriction on those windows on that side elevation here that would face towards those other properties. So subject to those conditions, it is considered to be acceptable and recommended for approval this evening. There was just one final point which Mr. Hendry raised within his statement, which was alluding to the lawfulness or whether or not the existing garage was built in accordance with the planning permission originally, and whether or not that impacts on members' determination of the application here this evening at Planning Committee. Just looking through the records, when the garage block was originally granted, we're talking about permission that was some time ago. The council's records indicate there was a building control application in 1990 that was determined in October 1990. So we're talking about some considerable time ago that structure would have been built. I don't know the exact time, but there's been no enforcement history on this, which would indicate that the building is still potentially subject to planning enforcement and isn't anything other than a lawful structure. However, it's important that members consider the application before them this evening, which is alterations being made to that structure, the other extensions, and the erection of the outbuilding in the location shown on the layout plan. So hopefully, Madam Chairman, all of that is clear. Happy to answer any questions, but yeah, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions outlined within the report. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. No one wants to speak. According to the chat function, no one wants to speak. Oh, Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll come to your rescue. Well, I haven't actually got a great deal to say, to be honest, because I can't see any planning reasons for the committee to refuse this. I think Chris has covered off the points raised by the speakers very well. I must say, when I read, which I did a bit earlier today, the statements being made and the emphasis on noise, I had already read the agenda report, but I went back to it because I wondered if I'd misinterpreted something. But it is just a domestic garage, so it will be normal noise of a car or two, maybe a bike, I don't know, going in or out, but nothing untoward. And in terms of the design and what is proposed, it all seems to me to be perfectly in keeping with the dwelling that's there already. So I'm happy to move officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Spray. Councillor Mrs. Spray. Does it find a seconder before I move on?
Madam Chairman, happy to second Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Mrs. Parker, you wish to speak? Then I'll come back and see if Councillor Ritchie wishes to speak.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, the two concerns really that have most in the uppermost minds of the two objectors who are very, very close neighbours, physically close to Pantiles. I mean, I was concerned about the overlooking window, given that it just serves a dressing room and also a bathroom, but I'm assured by the condition that it is going to be secured shut and will be obscured glaze. And I note there was an informative about the quality of obscured glazing as well. So I don't think that really will cause any overlooking at all. I know particularly about the concerns about the noise of vehicles, and I think the problem here is just the sort of layout of the plot, and the fact that the plot sort of wraps around the back of the two gardens, and so I can understand the concerns of the neighbours that the movement of vehicles and motorbikes and so on will disturb the peace to some degree. But as noted by Chris, it is, I suppose, a normal aspect of a domestic dwelling. It's just unfortunate that it is right behind their gardens. So I do appreciate their concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Parker. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item before I put it to the vote?
Yes, please, Madam Chairman.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Ritchie. I did say I'd come back to you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you. I won't labour this too much because Councillor Parker has pretty much touched on the points that I was going to make. So other than obviously condition 4, which was the one that I was kind of most concerned about with this application, and as Councillor Parker mentioned, obscure windows and secured shut is a good enough condition for that. And again, the point about noise, I mean, I was kind of concerned that there was going to be some sort of industrial or some sort of kind of house business going on here, but other than day-to-day living of vehicle movements, which either neighbour is also going to present to the applicant, other than weekend DIY, I don't see a problem at all with this application, and happy to second and agree with the officer's recommendations for approval. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Well, no one else is indicating they wish to speak, so I'm going to put this to the vote. It has been moved by Councillor Mrs. Spray, seconded by Councillor Ritchie. I'm going to put it to the vote for approval. Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Cunningham. Oh dear. I'll come back to you in a minute. Councillor Horner.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann.
For.
Councillor Monday.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Abstain.
Councillor Ritchie.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
4.
Councillor Wrench.
4.
Councillor Cunningham, are we able to contact you? I think perhaps the bubbling noise might have meant he's lost his connection.
Chairman, I have just sent him a quick message on the direct message. So, Councillor Cunningham, if you can hear us, please, could you please indicate by connecting to your microphone, or can you direct message me, please, and then I can read your vote out to the chairman and members of the planning committee?
Madam Chairman, I do apologise. I'm back.
Oh,
sorry, I had just a complete screen blackout. I do apologise. I'm
I
sorry.
get those all the time, Councillor Cunningham. That's why I have to come here. We're voting on the final application. You've obviously heard all
I could hear you, but I just couldn't get to you. In any way, yes, for the application.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Well, members, that application has been granted with 1 abstention. And that brings us to the end of our planning agenda this evening. I'd like to thank all the people that have made statements this evening and taken the trouble to attend and make their statements. I'd also like to thank all the planning members and everyone watching on YouTube. And I'd especially like to thank Emma, my facilitator, for assisting me this evening. And I'll say good night. Oh, do not forget, we're meeting again next week. And then the week after. So it'll be 3 weeks on the trot. So make sure it's in your diaries, members. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, members. Before we terminate this evening's broadcast, please can I just remind you that we will be retaining your performance data regarding your connection to this meeting in the event of a legal challenge on the way we've held this meeting. Please can the webcasting officer terminate the broadcast on the council's YouTube channel, please?